Hello fellow woodworkers and welcome to this week's edition of the Garage Workshop. This week we're going to be making a wooden novelty posting box. Roll the intro. So this was the first time in a while that I'd actually had to go out and buy some wood. If you've seen my other videos, I've been doing a lot of recycled stuff, and it was a little bit of a shock to say the least. I went to a big box store and got all the wood that you can see here, but I was just so surprised at how much it cost. It's really gone up. Okay, so fellow woodworkers, let's have a little bit of a chat about wood. This was filmed in December 21, and due to the pandemic and everything that's happened, you'll all be aware that the price of wood is skyrocketing at the moment. I just bought a sheet of 12mm MDF. It's from a big box store. I won't name it, but it's got an orange logo. I think you'll pretty much know what it is. This sheet was 610 by 1800, I think. And it was a lot of money. I'll put the exact price. It was something like £21 or £22 for a sheet, and it's not a full-size sheet. It's a smaller sheet. It's only 610 across. Really expensive, and at the moment wood is expensive wherever you go, whether it's any of the big box or local merchants. It is expensive. But the reason that I mention this is even the big box stores do have discounts, and don't forget when you're out buying wood to look in the used bins or the off-cut bins. So I've got this piece here which is exactly the same, 12mm MDF, and this whole sheet here, which is nearly half as long as the sheet I bought, was just £2, and it's an offcut. It's in good condition, not enough really to do anything significant, but don't forget the offcuts, and particularly if you go to a store like B&Q, for example, not that I'm sponsored by them or I'm saying they're any better than anybody else, but quite often you can pick up good pieces there, offcuts of worktop or good pieces of functional wood that you can use for different things. So, little tip, always keep the eye out for the offcuts in any of the woodworking places. And lastly, if you're a fan of IKEA and you go to IKEA a lot, I know a lot of people do, outside the IKEAs they usually have a free wood collection. They have like a pallet or a skip or a little bin where they chuck all the offcuts or pieces of wood that they don't want, and you can get them for absolutely free. So that's also worth a shout. So just a little tip, don't forget your offcuts. So to get started, I measured the wood and cut it in half. I let the size of the wood dictate what I did here, because I had no sort of preconceived or planned idea on how big I wanted the box to be. All I knew was I wanted it to be big enough and equal. So I got the wood, which was 1800, I think, and just cut it in half, which gave me sort of 900 slots. I remembered to put my mask and everything on this time, which I've forgotten in other videos. So when I'd done that and I'd cut all 4 sheets, I found that they were out by just a tiny little bit on the top. So what I did was I took about 5 or 6 millimeters off, and actually the final pieces all added up to being just under 90. It was about 89.5. So the next thing to do was get out the plunge saw. As you can see, I started here using my sort of mobile workbench trolley. I marked a centimetre down the edge, which I was going to use to cut the 45-degree angle bits, which is how everything was going to link together. But this was probably the first mistake I made. Well, it was, you'll see in a minute. Also, apologies for, there are some bits in the video where it looks like it's sort of misty. I'm not sure if that's dust, but it was actually quite a warm day. It was filmed on the 11th of December, and I think it was the fact that it's very cold inside the garage workshop, but it was quite warm outside. And I think it's just a little bit of condensation for that, and that appears quite a long way through the video, so apologies for that. So anyway, cut the first one. Didn't seem to be a problem, but as you can see, that it looked like it kept getting caught. And what I'd done is I'd raised this off using 2 bits of stud timber. I just couldn't work out why. It was really difficult to push. I kept moving the wood, couldn't see a problem. And it wasn't until I had a proper look that I could see that when I was actually cutting the wood, because it was raised up, it was a bit flimsy, it was cutting into the pieces of stud. So I took those off and moved over to the good old trusty saw horses, and it was much better. Now, when I watch this footage back, it looks like the wood moves a lot and the blade moves, and I get the wrong sort of cut, but it isn't. It's actually the fact that everything is just slightly moving around on the sawhorses. So all of the lines are exactly right. They're exactly cut straight. They're all exactly a centimetre or 10 mil. So when I'd done all the final cuts, I was really pleased with how they look. I'm going to give a shout out in a minute to the Parkside table saw, you'll see that. But I have got to say, this table saw, for the amount of money, produces some fantastic cuts, and it's gone up to a different level since I replaced the original blade that was in it with a new Saxon blade. It really, really has made a big difference, and the cuts are very clean, and I don't really have any issues at all. The only issue I did have was getting it back to straight after this, and that was because I'd not realised that the tension bolt that adjusts the width was down further than it should have been, but it was only a couple of seconds and I got it back in. But really, really impressed with the cuts on this. Okay, so as you can see, it's been dry fitted now. Again, shout out for those Audi corner clamps, they're amazing. I'm overall, it's not too bad. That one side has got a line, I'm not sure if you can see that. One side it hasn't quite married properly, it's the burnt side, and it's a little bit uneven, so when I take it apart in a minute, I'll just rub it down, hand sand it with some sort of quite abrasive sandpaper and just try and take that off. It's pretty much all there. It's a little bit wonky, if I'm being honest, but a lot of that I know I'm going to be able to sort out when I glue it. So originally the plan for this was just to glue and not to screw it in, but looking at it now, I think I might be tempted to put some screws in and sort of make them look a bit like rivets maybe, because I'm not sure that gluing on its own is going to be enough to support it, but it is exactly as I thought stroke hoped it would be. It looks exactly as it is. So what I'm going to do now is mark off the slot for posting the actual letters, and then I'm going to cut out or mark out the space on the back. How it's going to open, I'm just going to cut out a piece of this wood and literally just have a flap with a little bolt or connector on the top to undo it. So really, really simple, really, really basic. It's not got to be anything special. When that's done and it's all stuck together, then I'm going to use this as a template to mark out to put the top and bottom on, and I'm going to have a little bit of an overhang, but obviously I'm going to have to do that when I've glued it all, because if I cut it out now and the gluing makes it slightly wonky, the wood's going to be slightly wonky. So let's get on and do that now. So to make the slot, I started off by drawing a completely level line. I should have said off camera actually, I made sure that the worktop was level. So I drew around just a container I had, put in a falls in a bit and just put 2 holes in it. Now, one of the things that I'm determined to do is practice a bit more with my jigsaw. I'm really rough with a jigsaw, so I wanted to get some experience of practicing it. And this is just a really cheap jigsaw, by the way. I think I bought it in Asda and it was like 9 quid. But it does the job. I've got a better jigsaw, but I just want to have a little bit more close control, and this is very light and it's got a handle, whereas my other one, you sort of hold the body. It's a Parkside one. So I took my time because I wanted to get this as straight as I could. I'm not sure how well you can see it on here, but it actually turned out really, really well. There was only a couple of little pieces. I even swatched hand, look at that, showing off. There was only a couple of little pieces where it wasn't very straight, but it was pretty good. Now this was, without a doubt, the most difficult thing that I had done. I've never done what I'm going to refer to as a drop-in cut before. Now, I had really, really great visibility. I'm sure it's the same with all saws, not just the Parkside one, but I was able to see exactly where the blade was going in and just leave a tiny, tiny little bit of wastage either side, so I didn't sort of cut into the main part. This is the door at the back to access that I'm cutting out here, but this is the first time I've done it, and I've got to say I was super, super pleased with how this turned out, because it's actually not easy to do this. But luckily, because of the throw out of the table saw, as I moved plunger, as I moved along, the dust was being blown out. So I did both sides. and then I did both edges. It did kick up a lot of dust. You can see a lot of dust here, so I'm glad I was wearing my mask. Now, when it was all done, there was a couple of little bits left, obviously, so I just took my Japanese pull saw and I just chopped those out. Wasn't too difficult, got caught a little bit on that one, but when it popped out, the door was exactly as I wanted it to be, so it was nice and straight. Originally, I think I said earlier on that I was going to go for a glue and then screw, but it became more apparent that that wasn't going to be the best way of doing it. And I had some of these Parkside hinges lying around, so I thought I'm just going to hinge it. So I put 3 hinges on each side, so it was a total of 12, quick maths. And it was much better. It was easier to get to, and because of the depth, I was able to get my electric drill in to get it right. A couple of these took a couple of goes. You can see there, I took one out because it had slightly slipped and it wasn't level. And I took another couple out because when I put them together, one, it was sort of pushing and bulging in the middle. So I did this the first time, took them out and then redid it. You won't see all of that on here, because obviously I'm sure you've got better things to do than watch me redo things where I made a mistake. But it was just a couple of the hinges had pulled out and they weren't correct. I then gave it a sort of test fit to see how it was getting on. I'd done the 2 sides separately, and now this is me joining them together. Although you can't see, it's exactly the same process, just drawing the brackets in. Now here, interestingly, it had slightly dropped. So one side was lower and there was a gap at the top that was at the bottom, if you see what I mean. So I used a long sash clamp and I just pulled it in to get it absolutely level, and then I was able to put the brackets on. Obviously, once I'd done one side, it was much easier to do the other side. And the thing about using brackets is if you've got a slight gap in between, it pulls things in to a certain degree. You've got a bit of a tolerance, you know, sort of anything from 1 to 2 mil, depending on how you do it. But I got it all plugged in, got them all screwed on, and I was really pleased actually with how rigid it was and how it looked. It looked exactly as I'd sort of thought or hoped it had looked when I started the project. So having put all of those brackets in was definitely the right idea. Then I went to the base, couldn't set up a stop block for this one. So what I did was I just used the edge of the stop block to get the right size. And one thing I was very keen on doing, having made this mistake many times with MDF before, was to make sure I pre-drilled all of the holes, which I did, and then I just put the screws in. So the last stage was to fit the door, and I'm running this on 8 times speed, which is probably a good thing for you because this was way more tricky than I wanted it to be. And actually, the way that I had done it, it left the drawer so it wasn't lying flat, it was slightly raised up because I hadn't left enough gap between the hinges at the bottom and the top. But actually I'm quite pleased about that, because when I then put the connector on the top, or the closer to keep the door closed, it's got a little bit of sort of resistance against it, or a little bit of force against it. So it was actually a good thing that I did that. I hadn't planned to do it, but I'm glad it worked out that way. Very fiddly. I'm sure there's a much better way of doing this, but as you know, with a lot of my projects, it's all a bit cock-handed sometimes, but it did the job, even though it was quite frustrating. And I got all of the hinges. I got the hinges and all the screws, and of course the more you do, the easier it got, except for that last one. So you can just see it was a little bit raised up. Now, inexplicably, I forgot to film a thank you at the end, and I'm doing this voiceover the day after I did this. So huge thanks for watching. If this is your first time at the Garage Workshop, please hit the subscribe, hit the notification bell, the like, the comment. And if you are a regular viewer, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like or a comment in the box below. I reply to all of them. Thank you to everyone who's commenting so far. It makes a huge difference. The channel's really growing actually, and I'm not talking about 100,000 members obviously, but I think we're about 120. We're picking up quite a lot. So thank you very much for patience. I've got a couple of really interesting projects coming up, including my first one that I made with metal, which will be in a few weeks. So I hope you have a fantastic week, fellow woodworkers, and I will catch you on the next video. Goodbye.